what happened in the last month with you?
Hey, Matt. Hey again. It's good to be back after this kind of crazy thing happened. So I sold a song for 1 Bitcoin, which when this happened was about 60,000 American dollars.
Welcome to Dropped. Our guest this week is Violetta Zironi, an independent, self-managed Italian artist based in Nashville, Tennessee, who is not only following an interesting path, she's pretty much laying the path herself. After being signed and dropped by a major record label following her success on X Factor Italy, Violetta eventually found her way into the wild west of Web3, a term you'll hear a lot in this episode, but don't be afraid, it's just the next evolution of the internet. To date, Violetta's music NFTs have been collected tens of thousands of times. Let's dive into this unique story with our guest today, Violetta Zironi.
Input level,
Oh, that's better.
Yeah? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're good.
Good
We're
morning.
Great. We're great. We're doing
morning.
it. Doing a podcast.
Are you guys using like a camera? You both are using a camera.
Yeah, we're very fancy.
Yeah, we're both using fancy cameras. We're fancy boys. Very fancy boys. Well, Violetta, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to have you. I've wanted to get you on this podcast for a while because I think your story is remarkable. How did it all start? How did you first get into music, and how did you find your way from just being a person who loves playing and performing music to being in the music industry?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Obviously, I want to reiterate that. It's always a pleasure to be on a podcast and be able to, tell the different stories and the ones that you maybe don't hear as much. So I've learned a lot from podcasts like this one. So thank you. I guess so. I played music my whole life. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5, and that's been just my entire life. As a young teenager, started writing songs, playing with bands in my hometown. I grew up in Italy. That's where I'm from. Yeah, just kind of, I was very young, right? So the transition happened before I was expecting it, before I could imagine it would happen. Although I was sort of hoping that I could start young. But it's not like I was sure I was going to become a professional artist when I was in high school. I was just doing it all summer. I was performing in a band with my dad and another guy in his 60s on the drums, and we were just doing that. And then at one point I decided to apply for X Factor auditions in Italy because I thought the audition clips were so funny. Obviously, they are hilarious most of the times. And sometimes there's that epic moment, where you get 4 yeses and then you get all the way to the final. But I thought this was never going to happen to me. I just want to have my moment on TV and, maybe get some exposure from that. Little did I know that I would get 4 yeses and I would pass every audition and every live show and get to the very end of the season and become the third place at X Factor. I didn't think I would because I was making a genre that had nothing to do with what was trendy at the time, especially not in Italy, not on TV. But maybe that's what did it, because I was different. And no one had ever seen a girl playing a ukulele in Italy. I know it sounds ridiculous, but Italy is like 10 years back compared to like other countries in Europe. So yeah, I guess that sparked some attention. And then when I got to the final, I was, that's kind of when I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue this, and I finished high school as fast as I could and continued on.
So you were age 18 at that time, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did that feel to be an 18-year-old who suddenly found themselves performing in front of millions of people every night, and all the outside pressures of the crew and the production team and the record label that were involved?
In a weird way, I felt like I was meant for it. I just felt like I was comfortable enough, I guess. And like, that's what I was waiting for it to happen. Like, I wanted to have that kind of experience. So I actually lived it in a pretty chill way, I think. Maybe too chill and maybe too naive sometimes, because I realized later on that that wasn't a song contest. That wasn't a music competition. That was a TV show. And there are rules to a TV show. And you have to respect those rules, and you have to listen to the producers and the writers and the editors. They can make you look and sound like a real bitch if they want, and they did that sometimes to me because I just didn't care so much. I didn't pander. I didn't play for the camera. I was just trying to do my music and take things seriously, work with my vocal coach. And so, yeah, that was the challenging part, that I wasn't really, acting for the camera as much as I should have, which also led me to completely disregard the attentions that, some of us contestants get during the show from outside managers. I remember there was an instance where I'm going to name names. I don't care. Sony Music was the record label associated with X Factor Italy, would try to give you songs from some of their artists, so that you would take them as your first single. So I was offered a song from a really, really big artist in Italy, like very respectable, talented, kind of old school artist. And her manager was there saying, if you'll take this song, I will take you on as my artist. I'll be your manager right after the show ends. So, I was enticing. I was like, okay, let's go to the studio. Let's try it out. So
good old-fashioned bribery.
Yeah.
And I was 18. Like, I was like, okay, this sounds, I don't know, I feel a little bit under pressure right now. But so we go to the studio and I went to try out the song. And I was in the studio with all the label executives and managers and the other side of the glass and my vocal coach. She was the best. She really understood me. And she saw that I was feeling uncomfortable, that I didn't feel like the song belonged to me. And I was kind of giving into that bribe, And then at the end, she took me to the side, said, look, you don't have to take this. Like, if you don't like the song and this is going to be your debut single, you have to love it. It doesn't matter if he's that singer's manager. It doesn't matter. Like, do what you feel. So I turned around and I said, you know what? I can't take the song. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's mine. And he was like, all right, then I guess good luck, and never worked with him. But that was for the best because he did take on another artist and then completely bailed on him, which was terrible. So.
I mean, starting with bribery is probably not a good, way to lead into a relationship. So that's probably, it's super impressive that at that age and also that situation, you stand up and just say no. That I know a lot of people who have not done that, and also a lot of people who would not do that, and they would cave under the pressure or they would feel bad. I probably would feel bad. My question for you was going to be, you kind of answered some of it anyway, but I know a lot of people have been on those shows and some of them have gotten quite far, and I'm curious what came next for you, because I know how much control is behind those shows and how much they really try and put you where they want you to go. Where did you go from there? Like, what was it after saying no to that song? What happened?
Yeah, I took another song, which I liked a lot more. And it was from a musician, someone who played in a band of a big artist. And you know how sometimes there's like the drummer who writes a song, and I took that song and I really liked it. And he was very happy. And it was kind of like an underdog song, very different from those times. But I still got offered a record deal from the label, the partner label. And I couldn't say no to that. So
yeah.
I ended up...
It was a partner label of X Factor?
Yeah, it was Sony. Yeah. Sony Music. Yeah. So I got offered a deal, but it was terrible how they did it, The day after the final, when, of course, you're on such highs, like you just feel like you're on top of the world. And I just played the Milan Forum, which is 10,000 people, live in a huge arena. And
wow.
It was just insanity, all my friends, my family, everybody. Like, I was semi-famous at that time,
Yeah.
And I really felt like a superstar. Day after the final, I got invited to the label office in Milan, and they just put a piece of paper in front of me and said, we really love what you do. This genre is very fresh, very unique. I think we can make you into the Italian Amy McDonald, like that kind of thing. I don't know why, and I was like, whoa, cool. So here, we were planning to make 5 albums with you, if you don't mind.
5?
Yeah. And I was like, yes, hell yeah, I want to do 5 albums.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy that, isn't it? Because I remember when I got offered my record deal and I told my brother, and he was like, "What? They want to do 4 albums? That's such good news."
Yeah,
and that's how you think of it, isn't it? When you first go into the industry.
Well, you like that. That's me got a full-time job for the next 15 years.
Exactly.
That's kind of how you. I think that's kind of how you look at it. Mine was 3. It's the same thing though. You're like, well, every album cycle is like what, 2 years? So if you got 4 albums, 5 albums, that's a decade of a job.
Pretty much. It was crazy. And like I said, I was 18, so I didn't need to have like my parents there or anything.
No lawyer.
Well, I could have had a lawyer.
Right, but you're 18 and your parents weren't there. So I guess, like, how are you supposed to know?
Yeah, I didn't know. And they did not suggest you should seek legal advice.
Of course
before
not.
You sign.
Yeah, it's not in their best interest.
Isn't that like
it's so
borderline, like illegal?
It's illegal in some countries. I think it might be illegal in California because every time I've been handed anything, there's always something in the deal that says you should seek legal advice in capital letters because I think it might be a legal requirement, but sadly not in Italy, it seems.
Clearly not. And so, I had no clue how it worked. And so I was just like, hell yeah, I'm going to sign this. And I signed it on the spot. And it was a no advance deal with,
no advance.
I think no advance. I was left with 5% ownership of my masters. Their masters, I suppose. And yeah, just they were taking, 30 to 50%. It was a 360 deal. So management, publishing, booking, live performances, the master side, and absolutely everything.
Fucking hell.
So I didn't know until a few weeks later when I got into a room with a lawyer eventually, because my parents were like, what did you say?
Yeah.
And we realized, and they're like, you could have gotten like money for this, first of all, and you didn't. And this is going to be rough, but okay, this is what we got right now. So try to do your part, at least try to do your best. And I wasn't so worried because again, I was 18, and I was like, okay, this is like, it had some terms, the deal that said 5 albums, and they have to be like spaced out max 18 months in between each one, right? So there was some sort of time limit. And if they hadn't, I was like, when this ends, I'll be only like 23. It's going to be okay, whatever happens, So I tried to stay positive. But then what happened was that, they were doing some really shady stuff as well. Like they would come to me with opportunities like, hey, there's this company that wants you to sing their jingle for a TV show. And here's the fee, the fee is such and such. Does that work for you? And I respond to the email. I'm like, yes, it does. Little do I know, when I finally do see the agreement, that it's like 30% more, but they decided arbitrarily to just take 30% more and just, got me to agree in an email without showing me what the actual deal, like, I know. And I was 18.
We could say we were surprised.
There is an ethical duty of care when you take on, or there should be, when you take on an 18-year-old inexperienced artist. Myself, I'm just thinking to myself, at 18, I would have made every single mistake that you made, without a doubt, and I'm sure Greg can say the same. So this doesn't reflect remotely badly on you, but it reflects atrociously on the music industry, because you've got someone who's just been on a complete roller coaster, and then it feels like every little detail of this process is set up to take advantage of that rather than protect you against that.
Yeah, and I remember my designated A&R guy, he was not a bad person. I know he wasn't. He had daughters similar age to me, and he was sort of in charge of working with the young artists coming out of the talent shows. And I remember a couple of times he saw the frustration in my eyes, because all the while I was making an album, the album that was required, I was actually working in the studio with a producer to make it. And would send the demos, and get no response for months, and then I finally get them on the phone, and he's like he would sigh, and I could see in his eyes that he knew what I was going through, and he could feel for me, but he had no power. I've witnessed scenes like the power dynamics between the label executives, like between each other also, are pretty bad. Like I've seen the vice president of the label kicking an A&R's phone across the room because he dropped his phone, just like kick it across the room in front of me and like a bunch of other people, artists, So there's just like, it's a bad trap for everybody involved, not just the artists.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Good.
I mean, we know we each have our own stories of major labels. Matt and I was signed to the same label and dropped by the same label.
Good for you.
Well. Yeah.
So anyway, thankfully, that's not the end of the story. That's just the beginning of the story. And that's part of the story kind of sucks. So where did it go from there?
Yeah, so I was able to at least push for a producer that I'd chosen to work with. So that was really good. And I really put a lot into that album. I spent 6 months. It was a EP, actually. We spent 6 months in the studio because it's your first one, too. You want to do it right, and make the most out of what you're given. And it's going to leave a mark. But apparently taking 6 months to make an EP is too long for that kind of machine. When I delivered the record, they were like, I think we might need to wait. Now there's a new X Factor season starting soon, so the attention's going to go to that now. It's kind of late. Also, we don't think there is a single with these, all that bullshit talk.
It's textbook. It's textbook, isn't it?
It really is. It's just, honestly, it's like you're my memories talking to me right
now. Yeah. So I was like, oh, yeah? I think the contract does say that you have to release it after 18 months. So if you don't mind, I'm leaving. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I was able to leave.
And that's how you got out?
That's how I got out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they failed to do their part that they had to, So you just play by the rules and you just wait for them to break them. And that's what they did. So, because they're that stupid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's badass.
I mean, it was still very, it wasn't easy, it was very frustrating at the time. I remember my parents, they were trying to help me make it work. And in the meantime, I had all sorts of managers trying to approach me, trying to fix the situation and direct me and guide me in whatever direction they thought was the best for me. It was just a whole thing. And I was very confused. And then at one point, everyone's like, oh, you need a lawyer to go aggressively at the label. And then I stopped for a moment. I was like, what if I just take the train, go to Milan, show up to their office like an 18-year-old good girl and say, look, this is clearly not working out. Do you really want to keep me here when I don't want to be? And that's what I did. And they said, yeah, I suppose you're right. Let's just call it, So I just showed up by myself and I told them this very clearly. And they said, okay, yeah, fair enough. You never know. Maybe we'll do a distribution deal at one point. I'm like, yeah, right. Goodbye.
That is poetic, though. Yeah. You started it on your own and you ended it on your own.
That's amazing.
That's there's so much growth in there as well, from that experience, from that first day all the way to that last day. That's incredible.
That doesn't happen very often, ladies and gentlemen, listening to the podcast. That is not a common ending. That's so fucking awesome.
I guess it's true. It's true. I think they just saw that I was on such a different wave length. I was just on a different trajectory and they knew. And so I guess I got lucky in that sense. And I was able to take the masters as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even more impressive.
Mm-hmm. I paid a little bit, not as much as they paid to make them, but yeah. So
I signed with Warner Brothers Records in 2014. They still own my albums.
Oh no!
And
will forever. I think maybe I should show up to Warner Brothers in Los Angeles and just be like, guys, this isn't working out.
Yeah. Remember, who are you? Oh yeah, that guy from 2015.
Oh, that guy. Okay. It's all new staff now anyway. I don't think
there isn't a single person still working
there,
here from 2015.
But I bet they would just give them back to you. Like, why wouldn't they?
Because they owe them about $1 million.
Yeah, there is that.
Oh, damn.
They spent a lot of money on me, so I think that they're hoping that in about 522 years, they might get that back.
This makes me think, have you guys watched Silicon Valley, the show?
No.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Greg, you should watch it. And, Matt, you've seen it. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like, they have this whole dilemma at one point where, like, getting money from venture capital is almost like getting a record deal, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to get too much up front because then their expectations towards you are so high. Mm-hmm. It's a fine line to walk, right? You want to get enough money so that they're compelled to, like, make it back.
Incentive,
but not too much because you may not be able to keep up with that, right? So I feel like
it's such a dance.
Yeah, it is. And musicians don't get taught these things. Like, we don't go to business school like entrepreneurs normally would, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, but it's no different, right? It's no different than getting VC money.
When I signed my first deal, I was old enough to realize that this really was my money that was being spent. I was old enough to understand that. My mistake in the beginning, which Matt and I have talked about this before, but my mistake was to try and micromanage every penny they were spending so that I didn't go into too much debt with them, which didn't work. It lasted a few weeks until they spent $150,000 on a fucking music video. And I was like, I guess I'm in just like monumental debt now. So
yeah,
fuck it. Let's just have them spend as much money. Now my goal was to get them to spend as much money on me as humanly possible so that knowing that I would probably get dropped in the end anyway, I would have at least furthered my career somewhat. So most expensive photographers, more videos, all the touring I could possibly do with my band. Like, I just got them to spend as much money as possible because I knew what the end result was going to be. I was either going to be hugely famous and successful and I would pay that money back and that would be the best case scenario, or what happened, I would get dropped and I would have at least progressed my career as much as possible using their resources.
That was some advice that Greg gave me just as I was about to sign my deal. He was like, if you're going to do this, I know what you're like. You're from the north of England like me. You're going to want to save as much money as possible. You're not going to want to be ripped off for anything. You're going to be counting the pennies. He was like, my advice is just go against that nature, resist it. And if they want to spend money on you, let them spend money on you because no offense, but chances are a lot of these deals end in
I had so much
dropped.
faith in that.
Yeah. It was good advice though. Unfortunately, I hit a pandemic like a month after signing. So therefore, it was hard to spend money, but I spent what I could.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's pretty crazy. I guess for them, another thing that we don't learn until we are running our own businesses and our own careers is that money that they spend and never recoup, because that was something I was like, why would you spend it if you know you're never going to make it back? It's a tax write-off.
I was just about to say it's a tax write-off, yeah.
They're
just tax write-offs.
Because they make so much money on the back end from other things, investing in all sorts of like securities and all that, and of course other artists back catalogs and stuff. So for them, it's just they're saving money on on taxes. They're using us to save money on their tax
write-offs.
Like, it's just horrendous when you think about it.
'Cause we're perfectly imperfect, bittersweet, but worth it. We all need a little sugar. Perfectly imperfect, that's how we prefer it. We just need a little sugar.
I want to get back into your story at the point where you went to the office in Milan, you ended the deal, and suddenly you found yourself at the end of this like epic part of your journey that had maybe not worked out how you intended or how you hoped, with ownership of your EP. Is that right?
Yep.
And you went out into the world with that. Where did you go next then at that point?
Yeah, those songs never came out, the ones that I made. Also because, there's something to be said about the fact that when you're trying to make an album with a major, they want to have a say on how you sound. and how you look and the structure of your songs. And so, you know, I wasn't entirely satisfied with the artistic outcome of that record either. But I wanted to have access to the songs themselves, like, because even if I didn't take the masters with me and I left them, you know, I still wouldn't be able to re-record them for 10 years. I think that was the situation. So I was like, I want to be able to re-record them, right? If I ever feel like it. So anyway, I went out into the world and, you know, decided to just kind of pick up on the contacts that I'd made during X Factor times and started performing a lot, you know, up and down the boot of Italy, just on the train, you know, from north to south and east to west, and meeting people along the way. And in those travels, I met Jack Savoretti. My manager at the time was his Italian manager. So we shared that. And I'm still in very good relationship with that team. You know, they're good people. Just didn't work out with me, but they introduced me to Jack, who took me on tour with him. Right. So I toured Italy with Jack, and that was fantastic. That was some of the best memories of my life. I just turned 20. And I went on a really long tour, and that was my first experience as like, okay, wow, like on big stages and with an international band. And Jack was very supportive of me. He really loved what I did and said, look, you don't have to stay in Italy. Like, if you don't feel like this is working out for you, the genre of music you make, your spirit and attitude feels like it doesn't belong just here. So come to London, you know, check it out. And I was like, okay, I will. So nice. I went. And then I was in London, you know, for about a year and a half. I think my year and a half in London was really to train how to become a songwriter, because obviously you guys have some of the best in the UK. But London was tough. You know, it's a tough place. It's expensive. Yeah. I don't want to say, but like as an Italian, it's like, they look at you and they're like, who are you? You should be working at a pizza place right now. What? You know, that kind of thing. Even like I went to an acting agency over there because I was doing movies in Italy. I was like, maybe I can get a acting agent going. Jack Savoretti's wife, she's an actress, and she recommended me a few agencies, and they were just like, oh, you know, you're always going to end up playing the waitress in the trattoria, you know, like you may not, you know, I would focus in Italy, you know, this kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
So. All of these industries are just full of people telling you can't do it, aren't they? And then you go and do it, and then they're like, oh, you're so great at that. Can we represent you and take 20% of that thing that you're now doing that we didn't think you could do?
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but it was cool. You know, I had a lot of fun being in London, played some open mics and some little, you know, some of the songwriter shows, like the staple ones, you know, in London that are really cool. So I had that experience. And then I met another manager who lived in Berlin, who was from Berlin. And I started working with her. And then she told me that in Berlin, they have these amazing grants for artists where you could just apply and get your albums paid for, basically.
Oh, you've just given us some bubbles on your screen there.
I don't have that. Why does that not work?
Yeah, what I'm hearing from this journey is just this kind of relentlessness of you. Like, one, I'm like, where are we in time? And then you'll be like, and then that's when I was 20. And I'm like,
yeah. I think I learned to play guitar when I was 20.
Yeah.
I got
the amount you were squeezing into these years, and just the relentlessness of you and the work ethic. Also, just the boldness to go out to another city. I don't know how your English language was, or whether that was a challenge for you. Were those things issues that you, like barriers you had to overcome?
The language, I would say, was always, it still is sometimes an issue. Obviously, it's not my first language. And I'm in a position right now where I speak way more English than I speak Italian on my day-to-day.
I mean, you barely have an accent at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember reading Green Day lyrics and translating, because that's my favorite band. So
Mine too.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I started playing music with Green Day.
Me too.
No shit.
Yes, no, for real. That's why I play guitar.
Yeah, me too. Time of Your Life was the first song I ever learned on guitar.
This is awesome. So yeah, the language, I always had tons of fun, and I would make a point, like, try to pick up people's accents, and really understand, but that was cool. But I had no problem traveling, maybe because my parents sent me out abroad when I was very young, and they really like pushed me towards that direction. And they, the relentlessness that I feel like I still have, and the optimism is because they always believed in me so much, and they just said to me, there's nothing that you cannot do. You just have to figure it out. But you can totally figure it out, and you have no time to waste. Don't chill. There's no time to chill. Focus on your work, make money on that. Don't waste time serving pizzas, and that was the hardest lesson, because then I felt like if I did chill, I would let them down, so yeah.
Thinking about like what it takes to get into music, like this is what it takes. It just takes this kind of like resilience and fortitude and just and being built this way.
I think we've all got our story of that though too.
Yeah, you got to pave your own way, right? And that's what you've been doing this whole time.
In a way I miss those days of that relentless fearlessness, like I mean, Matt, I'm sure you have the same story. We've talked about it, your busking days and just that pure dedication where you don't give a shit. You're just like, I'm going to succeed at this, and I don't care what anyone thinks. And you just plow ahead, and any sort of roadblocks, you just bash right through them. I moved to New York City in 2009. I lived in London for a couple of years, and I moved to New York, and I wasn't scared at all. I was just like, fuck it, I'll quit my job. I'll move to New York. No big deal. And I did. And I can't imagine doing that now.
But you live in Portland.
Yes.
Which is, think about it. You're just growing into the difficulty, like think about it. Like for someone who's from the UK, living in Portland, to all the American listeners, let's just talk European for a moment. Okay. Like living on the West Coast of the US is like as different as it can get from what we're used to. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you found your own like comfort and cozy places, and you built your own life. But at the same time, like probably when you moved to New York, you wouldn't have been ready to, move even further away and like build a whole life that far away. So it's just getting easier. I think it just feels less daring now that we're older, because we have that experience, because we've done it before. But this doesn't mean what we're doing is any less difficult,
That's true. The daring aspect is definitely a reality. Yeah, it's just when you've never done something, it feels like this adventure, and then you've done it a couple of times, and you're like, oh, I'm used to this. This is not so big of a deal. So, year and a half in London.
Yeah.
Then what? Well, then what happened then?
I moved to Berlin because
for the manager.
Well, yeah, she was over there, and I was going to Berlin a little bit to play a few shows, and I liked the vibe. It felt they really facilitated international artists coming in and doing their thing, which I thought was brilliant. And they were offering grants. Literally, you just apply, and if you get it, you get a chunk of money that you can spend on making an album, and you don't have to pay it back. So I learned about that option, and I moved to Berlin so that I could apply for that grant.
Americans' heads would explode, when they hear that. That would never happen here.
Yeah, and because I was a European citizen, it was so easy. I just showed up, and like I moved, like as if I moved to another city in Italy. It was that easy. So I didn't get the grant though the first time around. However, I always had that like spirit of I need to make an album. Like I want to make an album now. I found a producer I want to work with in Berlin. I have a chunk of songs that I really believe in, and I want to record. I want to get this started with the help of that manager. And I wasn't gonna let not getting the grant stop me. So I started looking for investors. So that's kind of when I started just trying to figure it out by myself. And I think it's what really taught me how to do what I do right now with Web3 and just being very resourceful on your own. I raised like 30,000 euro at the time, just from private investment from people, put together a business plan, a budget plan, and went to Rome, went to Milan, went to London, just started asking people for money with like a plan, right? Wow. And nothing really in return. I was just like, you can just support me with this, and you're going to be able to say I was the first one to believe in this. And And so I did raise money. The coolest thing was I raised about 12,000, I think, for a US tour after I made that album. I wanted to play South by Southwest in New York and LA and come to Nashville and everything. And there was a fan of mine who had booked me for a couple of private shows, and he was very supportive. And I went to him. I said, look, I need to make this tour to promote my album. If you help me pay for it, you can come with me. And he was like, hell yeah. So yeah, he came and we were on tour together for like a month in the US.
It's just like every rule out the window. It's just
I love it.
Rules don't exist mentality.
It was so fun. And that was my mom's idea. Like she's the one who told me, like, look, like you need money to do this. You don't want the label. You don't want to bend over those rules. Make your own rules, and why not? People will listen. So you're credible. People will listen. So yeah, I just did it. And that's kind of how I kept going. So yeah, that was a cool time.
Your mum sounds like she would make an incredible manager.
Yeah, she pretty much is my manager at this point.
This is why I was really excited to talk to you, Violetta, is because of what Matt's told me about you is that you have sort of blazed your own trail, so to speak, and it's very inspiring to hear someone. And I shouldn't say so young, because I know that you were young when you started, and I think a lot of people that age probably are a lot less fearless than you clearly were, and it's so inspiring to see you just forge your own path to even the degree of the Web3 stuff is where I'm trying to get to. Is you have been so defiant in your ways that it's you've gone into a world that I don't even know exists.
No, I think it's, for me, it's just always been, I believe in what I do, you know, and I really, really want to do it. And that's it, and I don't think there's anything wrong in what I want to do. And I don't think there's a reason why I shouldn't be doing it. And I don't think people owe me anything, and I have to thank my parents for that, because they were harsh enough with me, but at the same time compensating the firmness with support, and showing me that they believed in it, that they saw my potential. And so I really owe it to them, I really do, that they just supported me so much. I don't think I would be able to be like this if it wasn't for them. So,
and that's a huge blessing too, because I think a lot of parents push their kids away from taking risks like that. So good job, parents.
Yeah, very good job.
To instill that fearlessness, for sure. It's like a superpower in this industry, to be fearless.
And I would travel far and wide to reach my destination, fly among the stardust, realigning constellations. So fire up my rocket ship, I'm ready to risk it all, 'cause you and me are meant to be the moonshot of that moment.
I'd love to hear about that moment, those last couple of years in Berlin that led into the pandemic. I know that you were building momentum again independently.
Yeah, for sure. So, my years in Berlin were some of the best in terms of like creative development, because Berlin is just a place that allows you to take your time to be creative and develop yourself as an artist and find the people you want to work with for a lifetime. I was telling Matt, we recently wrote a song together, but I don't really do co-writes anymore because I have two people I write with, and that's it, and then I wrote with Matt, and that went really well, surprisingly, because normally I'm just like, confined with two people that I met in Berlin, and really take the time to develop yourself. So I took a lot of time to do that, all the while I was touring, and I was making movies as well, flying out to Italy for auditions. And I did a Netflix movie, which is, that was one of the highlights of my life for sure. That was a fun experience. Rose Island, check it out. And then I signed a publishing deal, because if the record deal wasn't enough, I was like, wait,
It's my memory's talking again.
Yeah. So, which, I don't regret it. I don't regret that one because they did give me an advance. And, money does what it's supposed to. It makes up for losses and lag. When lacking something, you need it and you're going to use it, right? So I was happy that I took the advance money because that kept me going for a few years, really. It wasn't a lot of money, but I'm also like you guys, you're frugal, like count pennies and try to spend it well, invest it in my career. So during the pandemic, I was, that's kind of when the money started running out, but it was still a cool experience. And I was touring a lot, like I said, and I was working with this manager who, none of the things, the fundraising and all that, none of that came from the manager. Let's set things straight. It was all from me. But, she helped me with navigating the industry, book a tour, talk to the publisher, whatever. Right. So, yeah, I was picking up momentum, released another couple of EPs and did a European tour that was sold out. And that was February of 2020.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, which, it was really a highlight because I played, like 10 or 12 sold out shows all over Europe, which was awesome, by myself. And it felt like things were starting to pick up. But then, of course, the world ended.
Isn't it crazy how February 2020 seemed like this utopia, this like beautiful time in life because it was right before all the shit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I look back on 2020 with such fun memories.
Yeah, it was, but things were starting to pick up. I'd just done that Netflix movie, touring, like so much stuff, that really was great. I went on tour with Don McLean. You guys know?
Shit.
Yeah, that was
American Pie, yeah.
Yeah, I was doing some really cool things all over Europe, festivals, etc. But yeah, then the pandemic started, and of course, the world started to crumble. People getting fired in all the, offices that were affiliated to us and everything. So yeah, I just kept writing songs, and realized that I wasn't actually making any money, in any efficient way. Like the little money that I was making was from the movies, from shows that I was playing. And that's it. Certainly not from any streaming,
Did that feel a little bit like you were kind of like, because suddenly money wasn't coming in from elsewhere, you were kind of scrutinizing your income from music more, and then that sets you on a whole other journey, right? Because you're like, wait a second, why isn't music making any money? Why does my streaming statement look like this?
Yeah, I you're right. I don't think I'd ever really scrutinized it until that moment. I don't think I'd sat down and really realized. I just thought it was okay to just not make any money from streaming. It was like, okay, that's not what it's for. It's not for money.
Right.
Money comes
Which
from
is
other
a
things.
Crazy concept to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Which we could talk about for days.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's what we're brainwashed into thinking, that's it. Because also the highs that you get when you get good streaming numbers, it feels good, and the whole world is telling you that that's the only thing that matters, and then when it comes to it, you're like, okay, but does it though? Like if I'm locked in inside my house, I can't even leave. Nobody cares about my streaming numbers, especially if I can't even pay my bills with that. And then there was a TikTok wave, right? Everyone in the pandemic needed to make TikTok videos, dances. And I was like, this can't be right. Like literally, I've been doing music for 25 years. All it comes down to is a TikTok dance video.
I know.
No. Like that's just not right.
There has to be another way.
That's not why my parents paid so much money for piano lessons. Like, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the bubble. So yeah, I was getting super frustrated and really out of options at that time. Out of options. I was not a techie person. I was not into social media. I was not interested in doing any of that stuff. I just wanted to write songs and put them out. So I was like, you know what? I think maybe I'm done. I was 26 at the time. And I was like, I've been doing this for 8 years. Maybe this is it. Maybe I just need to find another job. Like I'm not willing to play by some stupid rules and be unhappy. It's going to make me unhappy. I can still make my songs and that's what's going to make me happy, but I'll just make money from something else. but I'm going to give myself one more year. I can't just quit now. I have to like give myself a little bit of buffer. So if by July next year, something hasn't happened, I'm quitting. That's it. Done. So I decided I'm going to make one last album. I had a bunch of songs that I written with my friend Michael. And I finally received the grant from the German government after 5 years. I got that grant, which is a blessing. They gave me 30,000 euro to make an album, which is incredible, right?
That's so amazing.
Yeah. Wow. So I was able to come to Nashville and make that album here. So It was my EP, Moonshot. And then I started shopping it to labels once again because I was so desperate, but I started going to like Blue Note, Decca, all these like a bit more, intellectual labels. And the answer was always the same. Your TikTok numbers are low. Your Spotify. God. I'm like, you guys are fucking
idiots.
You should be ashamed. Come on.
They really should. There's no development of artists anymore. They basically wait for the artists to develop themselves and then sign them at the peak of their online fame and use all the work that they've done. It's fucking
even awesome. Labels that are supposed to be a little bit more like for grown-ups, right? Like Decca or like, they should anyway. So yeah, they kept saying no. So once again, I was desperate until I go home for Christmas of 2021. And yet again, my mom, my behind the scenes manager, she's like, hey, have you heard of like NFTs and music NFTs? Snoop Dogg is putting out music NFTs. And that's when it all kind of started,
And this is where Greg
there'll be a break.
Greg has to go like take a shower or something. No, I'm kidding. It's just Matt's tried to explain this stuff to me multiple times. And I think there's a part of me that just likes resisting it, but also there's a part of me that's just I don't fucking get it, man. Like I don't.
Yeah, you do.
I don't, and I need you to explain it to me in a way that Matt has not been able to do. Because I just glaze over. Like my eyes glaze over, and I start thinking about something else. Because I think I don't know. I always just resist this shit, and I want to know. I genuinely, really want to know what it's been like for you So in the beginning, your mom comes to you and she tells you about this thing you've never heard of, right? I'm just going to place myself right there. I'm with you and your mom in that moment being like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then I want you to explain what the progression has been like to go from, because when he said that to me, I'm just like, I'm not going to do that. Fuck that. And then and I just put my wall up and I just closed. It's my own fault. I mean, I get in the way of my career all the time. Tell me what it was like and what the progression was like to go from not knowing about it to being very good at it, very successful at it. Like what made you even go, you know what, this is something I'm going to try?
What made me go like that really was the fear that I had, that I was going to have to stop being a professional artist. Mm-hmm. I was willing to try anything. I had 6 months left in this year that I'd given myself. And I was like, time is ticking. I don't have time to be scared right now. I don't of something new. I don't have do I really want to do music or do I not? And so I was out of options, and that was the kind of the last thing that I'd learned about. And I could have lost my whole career, but at the same time, I also didn't have so much going on that was taking up time. Mm-hmm. I didn't have gigs going on. I didn't have much, So I was like, I do have time right now, and I only have 6 months, so I better get going. So I said, yeah, okay, why not? And I just, how would you, so also for people that may be listening, how would you go about learning about anything? You just Google it, right? Mm-hmm. You're just going to Google it. ChatGPT was not around at the time. Okay. Yeah. We're in the pre-AI era too. So I just Googled it. I said, what the hell is an NFT? And the first question, because you can read any definition. NFT is a non-fungible token. What the hell does that mean? Okay, whatever, Ethereum blockchain, whatever. But like the first question came to mind is like, okay, well, how do I sell an NFT? That was the first thing I asked myself. And maybe that's how my mind works. Kind of the business mindset is like, okay, we can make anything, but like, how is this going to impact your career? Really, and I started going down the rabbit hole, realized I needed to dust off my Twitter account because that's where the crypto community hangs around, download Discord, which I thought was just for gaming nerds, and I'm certainly not a gamer, and not a tech person, but I just started going down the rabbit hole by just doing simple Google searches and listening to podcasts like this one. The first time when things really clicked was when I listened to a podcast with a few of the artists that at the time had success with music NFTs. And some of them, me and Matt both know. And they were sharing their success stories and what it meant to them. And what I heard in their voices, what they were just people like me who were struggling, and they couldn't find their place in the world. They wanted to express themselves outside of the schemes. And they couldn't in the traditional industry, and they finally could using this medium. And so I was really inspired by that. And I will never forget that day, winter afternoon, in my hometown, listening to this podcast and feeling like that could have been me. And there was nothing stopping me. And I just did it, and spent all my time. Like I'm an extreme person, kind of. I'm an Aries, I go all in, bang my head against the wall until it breaks, basically. And I just started working 18 hours a day on it, and nonstop. So
on what is what I want to know as well. Like, are you just talking about on the songs, like making the record?
No, the record was made. So It was good timing as well.
So this is, I guess, what my question is what were you working on? Because to me, and maybe a lot of our listeners, I don't even know what the fucking NFT is. I know that it's sort of a digital token or something, right? It's like I know nothing. I'm so ignorant to it. And I imagine a lot of people are. And so please explain to me what a music NFT is and how you sell it, what it's worth, and why anyone would want to own one. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, for sure. So a music NFTs is something that you basically create out of thin air. Okay.
Right.
So like, let's get that straight. So what the blockchain does, it allows you to really own something, like a piece of the internet, right? You're not going to rent it. You're not going to be hosting it on a separate server. It's like you really, really own it, custody it yourself. You self-custody it. If you own something, and in nowadays world, ownership has become something that's not really, like, we're not really familiar with it anymore, except for like real estate ownership. But think about it like a house. If you own a house, what are the perks of owning a house? You can make it, decorate it the way you love, you can make it the way you want. You can keep it for yourself. You can rent it out and make an income from it. You can sell it if you want, and make a profit from it. So the same way you can own a house and all the benefits that come with owning something, you're owning a piece of the internet, and the same benefits come with owning that piece of the internet. Whatever you put on it is up to you. If you find someone that sees value on that content that you've attached to this asset that you own, then you're winning. So that's kind of how I see it. Try to simplify it in a way that's understandable. I own my phone. What can I do with my phone if I own it? If I rent it, I'm limited. You know what I mean? And so that's what happens when we buy stuff on iTunes, music or movies. You don't really own that movie or that song that you purchased for $2. You don't really own it. They could take it away from you anytime. But if you own an NFT, it's yours. Nobody can take it away. So that has value.
I have such a small brain.
No, you don't.
How? So say I bought one of your NFTs, right?
Yeah.
What benefits do I get from owning it? Because I know that I like the analogy that you used, but I'm still trying to translate it to the internet. Like, I'm owning a piece of the internet, right? Like, how? Like, anyone that buys one of your NFTs, I'm probably not even saying this right. What can they do with it?
Whatever they want. I mean, in my particular case, and that's another thing that's kind of intricate to explain, because An NFT is really a token that represents something else, because it's not something you can use to like, cook or like, do gardening or whatever. It doesn't have this like immediate intuitive utility because it's digital, right? It lives on the internet.
Totally.
Right. So you can't really touch it. So, but like any product, I think of it as a product, it's up to you, the producer, the manufacturer, the creator of this product, to give your product a purpose, So what I decide to put on my NFTs as value is the music, so you're just buying my music. That's all it is.
Are they buying all of the album? Can they buy one song?
Yeah, they can buy one song, and there's artwork attached. I worked with my dad, who's a Disney illustrator, so he creates artworks, awesome. For my songs, and they buy the collectible. It's like when you're buying a vinyl record,
totally,
or like a print or a poster or whatever. What are you going to do with it? You're just going to look at it.
We had Rob Abelow on the last episode, and he talked about you actually as well. And I use this example because we were talking about this, and I said to him, a lot of the reason I think vinyl is still popular is because people have this ability to hold it in their hands and put it on their shelf. And when their friends come over for coffee or wine or whatever, look at this record I got. Like, how do you do that with an NFT?
Yeah. So, it's a digital world where less and less people own physical stuff, right? How many people do you know that used to have a vinyl collection, then they sell them all because they're moving across the world, they're digital nomads, everything is much more rushed than it used to be. And so you're just, by owning something digitally, it just allows you to carry it with you weightless, right? And carry it with you wherever you go. And you can always, pull out your phone or your computer or send a link and say, this, I own it, and then you can do whatever you want with it, really. Like, you can sell it, you can make money from it, you can use the perks that are attached to it. I give a lot of perks with my NFTs. It's almost like a membership program in a way, right? But that's what I choose to do. I don't have to do it, it's just my choice. I think it's what has worked for me. But that's all it is, and you can have NFTs about any other thing, like it could be anything, really. So think about digital art, right? Digital art as in like 3D art, for example, right? If you're a 3D artist, before the blockchain came around, they had no way to like physically sell a piece of digital art, right? You make a 3D something, you cannot sell it. You're going to post it on Instagram. People are going to consume it, look at it for free, right? And you're not going to be able to monetize it. Ever since the blockchain came around, you can actually create tokens of that. And so that's like your digital print of,
you can do like a limited edition run.
That's right.
Like a digital certificate. Yeah. It's like you could create 1 million prints and sign 10. The NFT is just you signing those 10 digitally, essentially. And those 10 that are signed are worth so much more than the 999,990 that aren't, because they're signed and because the artist said these are the first 10.
Yeah, and with digital art, it's actually the native medium for digital art is the internet, right? Is a computer, is a screen. So even if you print on paper a piece of 3D art, it's not really where it's supposed to, you know what I mean? Where it's supposed to be looked at. And so when it comes to music, nowadays that we record most of our music digitally, the native location for music that's created digitally is the internet. You're supposed to listen through speakers and a screen and, live it in the ether, So when you think of it that way, even vinyl is kind of obsolete. You know what I mean? It's like, it's from the last century kind of thing. So
I was going to say, we talked about this with Rob for a second. We talked about the resurgence of vinyl, and he had put out a post questioning, like, why vinyl? Why vinyl again? Like, why not the new thing? If we need to have a resurgence because people want to feel like they own something, they want to feel like they're giving it the kind of attention it deserves. Why are we doing it on vinyl again? And why are we not doing it on the new thing? And I think he was alluding to the idea that the new thing could be music NFTs. But of course, the first big NFTs were like these monkey pictures,
I guess I just have a hard time thinking about the fact that it's not don't want to reduce it. Because I don't understand it. So I'm not going to sit here and like ridicule it, because I really want to understand. It's not real, right? It doesn't feel like it's a real thing. I know. See, I see a lot. But I'm genuinely like confused by this, and so I'm trying to get an answer that like
just
makes
to get
sense.
you. Is this podcast real? Can you hold it in your hand?
Exactly. Bunch of fucking idiots making a stupid podcast that no one's going to listen to. But like, the whole point in this podcast for us is to learn, right? We're not here to like talk about ourselves and make ourselves look great. And like, the reason we're doing this podcast, the reason we spoke to Rob Abelo last time, the reason we're speaking to you now is so that we can learn things. Because so that mostly I can learn things. Matt's a lot smarter.
And the listeners.
But like, I'm the listener. Yeah, and that too. We want to teach people things while learning. That's a dream scenario. So, the reason I sound confused about this is because I am genuinely confused about it, and I'm trying to get an answer that makes sense.
So are many other people. They're all very confused, and it's
kind
very
of helpful, right?
Why would I guess my next question would be then, why would I buy? You probably already answered my question. Who is buying NFTs? Like, are there thousands of people? Are there millions of people buying NFTs? Are you making? You don't have to tell me this. Are you making a living from NFTs? Selling NFTs, is this something that I should be? Is this something that I'm an idiot for not getting involved in this?
It's kind of a tough question, right, Matt? It's like we talk about this a lot, and there isn't one straight answer. Let's just say NFTs and the NFT technology, because that's all it refers to, really. When you talk about an NFT, it's a technical term, right? It's like saying an MP3. Really. Yeah. It's the underlying tech, you know, it's like saying podcast is on an MP3 or a WAV file, so it's like talking about it that way. It's very early, right? There hasn't been mass adoption yet because it's still a little bit clunky. It's still in development, so at this point, I wouldn't necessarily think that everybody in the world has the patience and the curiosity and the drive to navigate the tech as it develops and quite actually be a tech developer, because in a way that's kind of how we're acting too, right? Coming up with new tech solutions that it shouldn't be on artists theoretically. It hasn't been on artists before. It comes, obviously, it comes with a lot of efforts that are outside of our comfort zone, but also comes with a lot of power, I would say, because you do have the ability to shape things the way you want them, and that's why I'm attracted to it, because it puts me in a position of power over my model, my business model, my music. And it's like being in the Wild West. Where you set your own rules. You like them, great. You don't, there's the door, So that's just, if your personality is like that, then I would say now is a good time to explore them, because you can have an influence and it's small enough that you can grow pretty big, pretty fast, right? But if that's not interesting to you, then you could wait, and try to find other solutions that work for you right now. To answer your questions, it has changed my life dramatically to be able to do NFTs. I haven't done anything else other than that for the past almost 3 years.
Which I think is so awesome. And
since that day.
About that too.
Yeah,
you don't do streaming at all, right? You don't have any music on streaming.
I have older songs, songs that I released prior to 2021. Yeah. They're still on streaming platforms. But since then, I've released 15, 16 songs. None of them are on streaming. I love that. And I haven't needed it, and a lot of people ask me, why don't you put them out there? Why not? And I say, I just don't need it. Totally. I don't think it adds any value to me right now.
And I completely, there's another reason why I was excited to talk to you about that, because I'm putting out an album soon. I've just finished, and I don't want to put it on streaming either. And so I'm looking for alternatives. And my alternative is, you're in the Wild West. I'm going to go back to the East Coast and put it out only on vinyl. But I wanted to know more about this for that exact reason, because I'm like, well, maybe this is the solution that I've been looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt's kicking. He's like, you asshole. I've been trying to convince you to do this for like the last 12 months.
I'm just desperate, right? Can I just take a minute? Because we haven't got into Web3 and we haven't got into music NFTs on this podcast until now, really, apart from a couple of brief mentions by Rob last week. And it was very purposefully because I was like, I want someone who is further down the road than me, because I have spent a lot of time and a lot of kind of mental energy on trying to understand what Web3 and what music NFTs are, following in the footsteps of people like Violetta. Violetta is very much like, in my mind, the trailblazer in that world. But just to pitch Greg on music NFTs for a second, just to tell you how I see it in a way that I think you might get it. So I know you love Tom Petty. He's your favorite artist in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine Tom Petty. We go back, let's say, to when Tom Petty was alive, obviously. And you go to a Tom Petty concert and you meet Tom Petty afterwards. You buy a vinyl off him. He signs it for you, but he signs it with his signature and his special little number underneath. And he goes, "You're going to need that number. It's gonna help you out in future, Greg." So you then find out that number and that special signature, he gave it to you because he could see you were a real fan, or maybe you paid a little bit more for it.
Did he just give me an NFT?
He then starts doing private concerts around the US, and he announces that only the people who have that special signature can get into those shows. He then also releases a live version of the album, and only the people who have that special signature are going to be able to claim that. Any kind of special access content that only the people with that signature can get. So that's all an NFT is, really. It's just we're taking the digital file and we found a way to certify that there'll only be 10 or there'll only be 20 or there'll only be 50 in a way that you can't just right click and copy and paste, because the copy and paste version won't be
attached. It's like screenshotting a picture on Instagram, right? And then being on your phone, it's not real. It's not the high res version or whatever.
It's either not the high-res version, or even if it is, it doesn't have the NFT stamped, which links it back to this central record, which says this one's real, this one looks and sounds exactly the same, but it isn't real. So what Violetta has done since is attached all kinds of what we call utility to it. And a lot of that utility is online digital utility. It allows people into weekly live streams, Violetta? Weekly live streams where they hang out with her, they chat with her, she finds out about them, they find out about her, they hear new songs first. But also, to bring it back to Violetta and not just have me talk forever, I'd love to hear more about that, Violetta, but also about how you're bringing this community that you're building. Do you have any plans to bring it into the real world in a tangible way as well, where there's a digital real world connection?
Yeah, for sure. I think you did a really good job explaining it.
That actually made sense. My small brain finally figured it out. Finally, I was able to attach some reality to it.
But that's one way of doing it. That's the tricky part, right? Because the greatest thing that's the most incomprehensible for artists is that you can finally do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Which
we've never been able to do, I suppose.
Never been able to do whatever you want when it comes to your music. You always had to follow rules set by an industry. And now there isn't an industry, right? So you have a ton of power to just literally arbitrarily decide what you have to offer, that you want to offer, that you're comfortable with, and what you think your audience will find valuable, you know? So you're able to create a product out of thin air by just offering what you have to offer. And so I personally, I'm a very social person. I'm curious about people. I like spending time with people. And I genuinely always had an interest in getting to know my fans, because if they like my music, we clearly have something in common. Mm-hmm. There's something that connects us. And so when I first started, I was like, I have no money to really give anything tangible, but I have time, I have time and I have music, and I'm just going to make myself available to people that buy a token to get access to me. Mm-hmm. So like Matt said, I stream with them once a week privately on Zoom. I've been doing this since I started for 2.5 years. Just every Friday, I do a live stream for them. For the longest time, I stopped a few months ago, but I was doing 5 live streams on Twitter a week, 5 days a week. Yeah. And now I only do it twice a week because I got really busy on other things, but 5 times a week. I fly out to some of my holders who have a lot of NFTs of mine, have certain perks that allow them to book me for a free show once a year. So I'm flying out to Minnesota in 2 weeks and playing a free show for one of my holders who's been collecting and stacking these NFTs for the past 2 years to achieve that point where they can book me for a private show. Last year, I went on a 5-day cruise in the Bahamas with one of my holders who extended the invitation to other holders. And I played on the boat for them for 5 days, and hang out. And they just have to pay for my flight and accommodation, but the performance fee is waived, because they're part of my community. I write custom songs for them. If they need it, they can use it for their business, monetize. I'm basically giving them access to my services, a lifetime access, as long as they hold the NFT. Another holder of mine, to give you another example, runs a business, almost like a resort aggregator for Florida Keys, asked me to write a song as that would be the soundtrack of that website.
Right.
So I did. So he's able to add a valuable addition to his business, right? This kind of thing is like you're eliminating the middleman too, right? We don't need a lawyer who's going to make a contract between me and that guy. I made the terms beforehand. He knows, and that's it. No middleman. Right. We don't need a booking agent to do the whole thing. Fly me out to Minnesota. No, this is an agreement between us, peer to peer, as they say.
Yeah.
So it has changed my life. I've sold almost 10,000 music NFTs, kind of on the primary side, as in me to people. And the cool thing is that people can't really wrap their head around is when you own something, you can sell it too, right? And if there's enough demand, you can sell a lot. So people kept buying from each other to the point where we have over $2 million in secondary sales, as in people spent over $2 million just buying my NFTs off of each other afterwards, know? So there is a market. Obviously, I wouldn't say necessarily this is something that would apply to everybody. This is my product.
Definitely very specific and however you want to lead your career. I mean, it's definitely not for everyone, but
this is my product. It's not like a standard, here's a music NFT, it's going to do this. No, it's Violetta product,
Totally. Based on the way that you've handled your career since you were 18 years old, it's not surprising this is where you would end up in total control, doing something that not everyone else is doing. You've clearly demonstrated that that's how you wanted to do this from the beginning in a way,
Yeah.
Just wait for the technology to catch up.
Yeah, it's. I feel old. I feel out of touch, but I also feel like it's fucking cool. I don't know. It's just you've made your own path, and Matt too. I mean, I know Matt, you've been involved in this as well. I'm impressed by both of you.
And Matt, for example, does a better job than me. Going back to his question as well, to try and integrate a traditional path with a purely Web3 path, I personally haven't been focused on that at all because, my philosophy is go all in, I've gone all in because I wanted to master this and then take my time later to figure out perhaps a transition. I'm going to do a crazy kind of tour now in September and October, playing 3 different continents. And I'm trying now to integrate, physical assets with digital assets and try to onboard people to my fans, community, through the use of digital assets connected to physical things and trying to figure it out now. But I felt like I didn't have the time to think about that in the past 2 years. I really needed to make something work. I needed to prove a concept before I could start experiment with weird things, So
the cool thing is, Violetta, as well, that you're in this small group of artists that are kind of, I guess it's kind of a blessing in a way that you got there at a time where it still needed to be worked out. So you've worked it out yourself and you've defined how you want it to be. And I'm thinking back through different platforms that have been dominant and they're not so dominant, and forms of consuming music that have been dominant and not so dominant. And as they've come and gone, I've never had that luxury of being in a new space or a new platform as it's still being defined. And that's the beautiful thing about that Web3 space still today. Everybody, a common thing you hear people say still in spaces today is we're still so early because it's still being worked out. There isn't mass adoption yet. And because crypto is the Wild West, it's full of scammers. There are so many scammers. There's things that can go wrong. There's a learning curve. You could be speaking about the early internet. I could have just, you could take that quote and apply it to the internet in 1998, you know? And that's all it is. And people like to be afraid. They don't like it. Strange. I'm going to run the other way. And fair enough, but you do miss out on something when you do that. So yeah, I'm inspired by that space. And what I've done is I've kind of plugged it into my operation as it already was, you know. I am still on streaming. I'm playing live still, making albums in a traditional sense on Patreon, on social media. But hearing you speak, Violetta, about kind of going all in, it does make me think that maybe I'm spread a little bit too thin. And maybe that's you too, Greg. You know, we're constantly complaining about we don't have time for all of this social media, and it doesn't seem to be landing in the right way. So maybe for you and I, being more laser focused would be beneficial. And it's an interesting time for you to be having this conversation and hearing from Violetta, I think, because Violetta, Greg is just finishing up his new album, deciding how to release it. He's had ideas of only doing it on vinyl, on doing it on vinyl and downloads, on doing it on vinyl downloads and streaming, staggering the release of that, like all different ideas. So I think you're still pretty open-minded to that, right, Greg?
Yeah, I'm definitely not closed-minded to this. I think it's just something that I don't understand. So I've always been a pretty open-minded person, I would say, but I think, you know, like Violetta, it's always been this sort of low-key rebellion too, that like this is not a fair situation, or this is a fucked up situation. I'm not getting paid for something I should be getting paid for, or I don't have access to the fans that I've spent 15 years trying to find, that I've already gained access to, but now the algorithms are shutting me out, and so I go around quite pissed off. In general, I'm just idling at pissed off at the industry and the shape of it. It's cool that you can just sort of grab it by the balls, for lack of a better word, and just do it however you want to do it, and find your own way to do this now.
See, I think it's honestly, this is a bigger conversation. It doesn't just, it's not strictly related to Web3. I think these are realizations that, you know, Matt and I have come to because of the use of this tech, because it showed us that actually you can do whatever you want. Yeah. Whatever it is, whatever works for you. This thing worked for me, you know, and but it taught me that it could be applied to anything else. You want to do just vinyl? Do just vinyl, you know, but the important thing is being laser focused. Like you're choosing to cut out all the other things and focused on the one, then you better nail that one, you know, because then the downside of trying to do everything is you may not be good at all of it, right? And spending all your time like spreading yourself too thin and wasting energy. So that's the biggest lesson, I guess, that I've learned is whatever you choose to do, you have to master it. And maybe it's streaming. You know, there are some people that focus on streaming and they're very successful. They found a key to it that works for them. And that's it, right? But I think we're all brainwashed that we have to use all the tools. That's the phrase I hate the most is use all the tools, because it's one of those things they don't give you any context. You know what I mean? Like use all the tools. What if you don't know how to use any of them? What if you know how to use all of them a bit bad, you know, not quite well? You're just going to make a big mess. You know what I mean?
Jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So maybe, you know, learn how to use one thing very, very well and do that and be the best, you know? And so that's what Web3 taught me, you know, that I didn't know about myself. So,
well, maybe I'm going to dive in and take a look, because maybe that's how I release my album.
But vinyl too, you know, there's big communities that are obsessed with vinyl. They're obsessed, you know, and they Don't use Spotify. There's record labels that just press vinyl, and they go to vinyl festivals and conferences, and it's absolute nerds, hi-fi nerds, and they adore the artists that focus on that. So that could be another avenue. Totally. But yeah, it's going to be like, and the thing is, the pop artists like us are always naturally stirred away from those niches by the industry. Industry does not want us to be in a niche.
No.
But why do we all have to be pop stars? I don't want to be Taylor Swift.
That sounds fucking horrible.
Yeah.
We all had our shot. we all decided that that's not the life we wanted.
Exactly. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, that machine showed us, didn't it? They were like, they took us in and were like, hey, you guys we think that you've got a sound that could appeal to a lot of people. And then they met us over the course of a year or two and we're like, oh shit, they're not going to be that. And then they dropped us. That's kind of like certainly one thing that we have in common, because it's certainly not that our music doesn't appeal to people, because we've all proved that in our own right and in our own ways. I think a great way to kind of come full circle on this would be to ask you, when you reflect back to the beginning of your career and why you first got into this, what are the parts of the process that you love the most and that got you addicted to being an artist? And two, now that you have been laser focused, where do you go from here? And is there anything that you want to, like any balances that you now want to readdress? Do you want to get out and play live more? Do you want to record more? Do you want to carry on down the Web3 thing? Or do you want to kind of now broaden since you've gone niche and found that success? Does that make sense? Hopefully it does.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Some of the things that, some of my highlights, things that I look back on and I'm very proud of, and they're very significant. The thing that I love the most and that I could not do without is really just writing songs is what I love doing the most, So ultimately, I would say that's my life goal, is to have the privilege to sit in this room and write songs and record them and listen back to them. Like, that's my favorite thing to do, So ultimately, that's my goal. And I do all this because I want to get to that point, where I don't have to worry about anything else. Of course, there has been things that have made it even more special. I want to tell this one thing, and maybe we'll get Greg even more interested in this, and just to tell you the difference, right? Like, for so many years, I tried to work in the traditional industry and never felt like I could really build that support system from fans and appreciators. And then 6 months into Web3, as I'd released my Moonshot EP as an NFT collection, 6 months into it, only 2 weeks after we sold out the collection, I flew out to New York for an NFT conference. And a lot of people who bought my NFTs showed up to a concert that I did in a tiny little bar in Lower East Side. And as I start my first song, as I get to the first chorus, the whole room is singing along, word for word. I lost it. I couldn't continue singing, burst into tears, let them finish the song. I'd never played in New York before. And I show up to a room full of people singing all my lyrics in perfect tune. And I was like, where did you guys come from? I didn't know you like 3 months ago. But the bond that had been created was so strong. The people flew out to New York from all corners of the country just to see me and knew every word. And that's how strong. And that gets really addictive, of course, because you get that validation and it motivates you. It fuels you. I need to keep doing this for them because I see them being happy and having a good time together, So that is massive.
You found those people on Twitter Spaces?
Yeah. Just by singing live on Twitter Spaces with my guitar in my phone, and that's all it is. That's what music should be, simple. Yeah. I listen to it, I connect with it, I support the artist, and then we have a good time together.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Violetta. You've shared so much. I know we've kept you a little bit longer than we even intended to, but it was just too interesting to cut off. We really appreciate you. And is there anything, in fact, would you tell the listeners where you would like them to find you, or where they can best find you? It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I always recommend, visiting my website, violettazironi.com. Maybe we can leave a link in the description.
Yeah, we will do that.
And otherwise, all social media platforms, of course, from TikTok to X to Instagram, YouTube, everything. Mold Music is on Spotify. Don't recommend using it. Use Tidal, if anything. And that's it. But most of my website, violettazironi.com.
Amazing. And also, they'll find you on X Spaces, right?
Tuesdays and Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
So, hey, Violetta, thank you so much for joining again. We shot our podcast a little while ago, and I was editing it, and we were kind of ready to put it out, and then something crazy happened. You made something crazy happen in your career, and it just wouldn't have been right to put out the podcast without touching on this new thing. So thanks for taking another moment to join me and to tell us all about that. So what happened in the last month with you?
Hey, Matt. Hey again. It's good to be back after this kind of crazy thing happened. So I sold a song for 1 Bitcoin, which when this happened was about 60,000 American dollars. Wow. So that was just one song. And it was pretty incredible. In short.
That is insane. That is so. I remember talking to you a while back, maybe a year ago, and I remember you saying that you wanted to do that, and not really knowing how you were going to do it, but just saying, this is what I think it's worth. I want to sell a song for a Bitcoin because it hasn't happened yet. And now here we are, and you've done it. So, can you kind of get into like how did that happen? I know you, like a massive part of your kind of mission statement has been to be the artist who revalues music and even puts your music in the realm of like collectible fine art. And I've always thought that's a really interesting take in a world that is devaluing music to be worth nothing, unlimited songs for $9.99. Enlighten us. How did you get from people thinking songs are worth nothing to finding a collector who was willing to pay 1 Bitcoin, over $60,000 to collect one song? And not even, and what did that come with? Did it come with any master rights or any publishing rights or utility or anything like that?
Yeah, well, good questions. The song per se, the NFT that sold for 1 Bitcoin doesn't really come with any utility except the holder who now has the piece has a non-commercial license to the song, but they don't own any master rights or publishing or copyright to the song. So I'm the sole owner of all the rights attached to that piece of music. How did I do it? Let me tell you this, like it wasn't easy. Okay, like that's the first thing I want to say. It's not something that I would have been able to do perhaps 2 or 3 years ago when I first started my journey in Web3. It's something that I would have aspired to, obviously. Not so much, obviously, it's nice to make a living. It's nice to make a living with your music, absolutely. But the main goal for me was always, like I told you as well about a year ago, I want to fight music inflation, and I want to set a new bar. I want to prove a new point. Yes, you can access all music for $9.99 a month, but some music, certain music, is actually worth a lot more, and that's okay, and you can do that. It doesn't have to be the only way, but it can be a way. So that was really my goal, in order to show the world that this was possible and hopefully inspire new artists, because I think we talked about it. I got inspired by people doing things similar to this one. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's good to continue this and raise the bar more and more. So how did I do it? Honestly, it's hard to say. I went around the world for a whole year looking for the people with which this kind of conversation could resonate with, right? Obviously, if you go into a record label, the conversation is not going to resonate. They're not going to necessarily take you seriously. But the good thing about Web3 is that it's group of people that sort of want to defy the traditional ways and believe in a different kind of future. And sometimes they're crazy, crazy kind of visionaries, pioneering a new way that may or may not work in the end, but they believe in it, right?
Eccentric,
and so,
right?
yeah, and I consider myself one of those people who doesn't think that things can't change. I think they can. And so I got really into this kind of community, the Bitcoin community, over the past year and a half, not just online, not just by participating through purchasing Bitcoin and learning from them, but also really I traveled the world a lot. I went to from Hong Kong to Singapore to Dubai to everywhere I could go where people were gathering and talking about this. I was there every single time, performing, presenting music in front of them, because that was a big thing. Like, music is not a part of the Bitcoin culture very much, not so much, right? There is some amazing music artists that have been creating music around the culture of Bitcoin. But in terms of the Web3 Bitcoin community, not so much, right? There's like maybe one artist that's doing one or two. So I just went everywhere and performed and told my story and explained what my goal was and why I thought Bitcoin was the way for this to happen. And I found some people that believed in my vision. And ultimately, when I put my song up for auction, they assigned the value of 1 Bitcoin to it. So
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it does show that you just have to kind of, I mean, there'll be so many people that see that sale and they see, like, I know you're doing a lot of short form stuff around it and you're trying to tell the story through TikTok and Reels and things, and that seems to really be connecting. But I look in the comments and people are just like, how did you do this? How can I do this? And it's like, I know how you did it. Like, I don't know the exact mechanics, but I do know that you first went into an area that nobody was interested in being in 2021 and started exploring music NFTs, and you were one of the first. And then you built a community of thousands of people by being in Twitter Spaces for like 15 plus hours every day. I saw you. I used to log onto Twitter and your little icon would always be there, like beeping at the top, showing that you were speaking in a space. And yeah, and then you've gone out into that world and you've found the people who believe in you and want to like back that up, which is incredible, really. So how did it feel to see, you must have been nervous when you were doing an auction, you must have been nervous putting it up for auction and not, is anyone going to show? I know people tell you that they're interested, or they tell you they're excited when you tell them that you're going to do it and maybe make the right noises, but nobody is obliged to come through with any bids, right? So how did that feel?
It was definitely nerve-wracking. I did my best up until that moment, and I guess I came to closure with myself, at that point. Whatever happens, I couldn't have possibly done any more to ensure a good result. What I did on Twitter Spaces at the beginning, I did in real life for the past year and a half. Literally, I was everywhere. So I was like, and I was very tired too. And so I just thought to myself, you know what? I did my best, and whatever happens, happens. And if it doesn't go as I hope, I guess we'll try again another way, but then it did. And I didn't have like a specific, obviously 1 song, 1 Bitcoin is an amazing tagline. It's an amazing thing to have, is an amazing concept also because of what Bitcoin is. And the way people talk about it in the world. Now, being able to assign the same value as 1 Bitcoin to a song, it's a pretty strong statement, for many reasons, because not only is Bitcoin worth a lot of money now, but also it's this controversial thing, that sparks conversation and discussion, and people don't agree on it, in the world. And so I wanted to question in people's minds, I wanted people to also question music the same way they, are conflicted about Bitcoin. Oh, wow, like now this is So, that's what I was hoping for. And then when it happened, I was like, it was honestly, when it happened, it was almost like I've never run a marathon in my life, but I can only imagine if you train for a marathon for many years and then you win it, you die like on the floor, you're so tired, yeah. But you're also like, okay, I won. I mean, yeah, that makes sense because I worked so hard for it. It's not like it fell from the sky. It's something that I really got to, and I know every minute of the struggle, I lived it, so I know. It's not like I won the lottery. So that's kind of how I felt on the spot. Whew, okay, I made it, and now it's over finally, kind of thing. But then it took me a second, and then when I went and played the song just on my own, I realized, okay, wow, like, this is my song. It brought me back to the moment that I wrote it, and wow, okay, it surprised me again. That's the power of music, it's more powerful than making money or achieving something significant. The song itself is what surprised me again, is what made me really happy. So, yeah.
If you're there,